Chapter 2384, Going Out of Town. Published by Divine Tao Library. Translator, Salavan and Rykov. Translation checker, Pew Pew Lasergun. Editor and proofreader, Leo of Zion Mountain and Dale Ligerkeys. Walking out from Ice Heart Pavilion, Yang Kai walked straight towards the location of where Ling Yin-chin and the others lived. He wanted to go there so he could return the spirit purifying array to her. After a short walk, he suddenly noticed that someone was eyeing him. Immediately, on full alert, Yang Kai turned his head around. There, a man with his eyes wide in a glare was staring straight towards him, looking as if he had seen a ghost. Pang Guang. Yang Kai was also taken aback. He didn't think he would actually bump into this Marsh City Lord here in Clear Sky City. When the solitary void Great Maelstrom first appeared, he and Yao Cheng Jun were swallowed up into the solitary void sealed world, and Pang Guang who chased him all the way here was not able to escape disaster either. However, Yao Cheng Jun was busy stirring up trouble with Yang Kai back then and was worried about Pang Guang taking advantage of the situation, so he shooed him away. Yang Kai thought that Pang Guang might already have met with a tragedy. Even if he was a First-Order Emperor, it would be hard for him to sustain himself in the endless solitary void sea. But now it seemed he was wrong. This man was truly hardy and somehow managed to escape the solitary void sea and arrive on Clear Sky Island by himself. From his travel-worn appearance, it was clear Pang Guang arrived on Clear Sky Island after a long struggle. As for how he did it, that was impossible to know. Yang Kai was shocked that Pang Guang was still alive, but Pang Guang was even more shocked than Yang Kai was. After all, Yang Kai and Yao Cheng Jun were the only ones left on that island when he left. From how desperately it seemed Yao Cheng Jun wanted him dead, how could Yang Kai have survived? He should have been torn to pieces by the enraged Yao Cheng Jun. But Yang Kai was safe and sound when he ran into him now. He appeared to be mighty as a dragon and fierce as a tiger. There was no way that Yao Cheng Jun could not match up to Yang Kai, so there must be some other reason that this brat was still alive. Perhaps it was Yao Cheng Jun who let him go. Just as Pang Guang was wondering whether Yao Cheng Jun had also arrived on Clear Sky Island, Yang Kai grinned at him and pointed up his thumb, gesturing it across his throat in a slitting motion. Pang Guang's face turned dark and he became furious, thinking to himself that this little brat was really arrogant. If they weren't in an unfamiliar place at this moment, he would have made an example out of Yang Kai here and now. Even though the two of them saw each other, they had no intention of interacting, so they just stared at each other for a while before walking past one another, bumping shoulders. Yang Kai wasn't very afraid of Pang Guang. With the power he had now, there was indeed no reason for him to feel threatened by a First-Order Emperor Realm Master. What's more, they were in the inner city, a relatively safe place. Yang Kai had been here for many days but still never found anyone fighting. Compared to the outer city, they were like two different worlds. If Pang Guang dared to make any moves in the inner city, then Clear Sky City's law enforcement team wouldn't let him get away with it. In just a short amount of time, Yang Kai found the cave mansion where Ling Yin-chin and the others lived. It was also a mid-grade cave mansion not far from his own. After handing the restored spirit purifying array back to Ling Yin-chin, Yang Kai stayed at her place for a while before leaving. When he returned to his own place, he was greeted by a worried Lu Xianyun. Yang Kai would be out for the whole day every time he left, so it was inevitable that she would feel nervous that something might have happened to him. The closest person she had in the unfamiliar Clear Sky City was Yang Kai alone. If even Yang Kai disappeared, then she really wouldn't know where to go. Time seemed to have gone back to several years ago, when the two of them were forced to join Blue Feather Sect together. She and Yang Kai had both fallen into that same boat together back then, so they depended on each other. She didn't expect them to encounter a similar situation again a few years later. Junior sister, I have to go out of town in 2 days. Out of town? Where to? Lu Xianyun was taken aback and asked him in a hurry. I don't know where either, but when I went to that artifact refining Grandmaster to repair the spirit purifying array yesterday, he told me he had a way out of the solitary void sealed world and needs my help with retrieving something. Yang Kai hid nothing from Lu Xianyun and told her all the details of his agreement with Sangde. Lu Xianyun felt mixed emotions when she heard this. First, she was happy that Yang Kai had actually found a way out of here so quickly, and from how Sangde put it, it seemed like the chances of success were quite high. The worry was that there was no one able to confirm whether Sangde's words were true or not, and even if it were true, there may be many dangers along this path. Senior brother, must you go? Lu Xianyun asked, pursing her red lips. Yang Kai chuckled, if there is hope in front of us, we must catch hold of it. Don't worry, even if Sangda has any schemes or tricks up his sleeve, I'm not afraid of him. If the way out that he claims to have isn't real, then so be it, but it would naturally be good if it were true. As for you, will you be leaving with me or staying here? The reason Yang Kai told Lu Xianyun this was so he could ask whether she wished to stay here or come with him. When she heard this, Lu Xianyun immediately understood what Yang Kai meant. If she followed Yang Kai, she would definitely be taken into that mystical place and brought along with him. She had spent some time in that space and knew that although it was a bit empty and lonely, the world energy was dense and without any disruption force, so it could be freely absorbed by people. It was a very mysterious place. After careful consideration, Lu Xianyun said, I think it's better if I stay here. Yang Kai was surprised. This answer was out of his expectations as he thought that Lu Xianyun would go with him. Lu Xianyun smiled, we're in the inner city, so there won't be any dangers for me to stay here and you don't have to worry, senior brother. What's more, if Sangda's plan can't be relied on, then it would be better for me to stay here and get familiar with the surroundings. You never know, we may end up having to live here for a long time to come. When she did not seem the least bit in a hurry to leave this damned place and even appeared to be quite happy living here, Yang Kai was struck speechless for a moment. He could only nod, then you be careful. Ling Yin Chin, Zhao Yi, and the others also live not far away, so you can meet up with them often. They've lived here for many years and have valuable experience. Lu Xianyun smiled sweetly, I know, senior brother. You have to come back soon, I'll be waiting for you to come back. At the end of her sentence, she couldn't help but lower her head, and her cheeks turned slightly red. The atmosphere didn't feel quite right to Yang Kai. He had clearly come to ask Lu Xianyun whether she was going to stay or accompany him, so how did it end up sounding like a goodbye between a married couple? He gave her a quick answer before disappearing into his own room, closing his eyes, and beginning to meditate. 2 days passed in a flash. Early on the morning of the third day, Yang Kai opened his eyes and checked around with his divine sense. He found that Lu Xianyun was sitting cross-legged in another room, so he didn't disturb her and instead went straight out of the cave mansion. He had already said what he needed to 2 days ago, so there was no need to say any more. As soon as he left the inner city, Yang Kai could sense that he was being followed. Releasing his divine sense, he found that the person following him was merely a first-order Dao Source realm cultivator. Even though they cultivated a good concealment technique, it had little effect under Yang Kai's powerful divine sense. Yang Kai frowned as he had only been in Clear Sky City for a short amount of time and didn't seem to have offended anyone during this period, other than a certain guy called Yu Leping who he had beaten. At that time, a young woman warned Yang Kai and told him that Yu Leping was from the city lord's mansion, and for him to be more careful. Now, it seems like Yu Leping really did have some connections. As soon as he left the inner city, he was watched by someone, and there was a good chance that Yu Leping was the one who sent his observer. Peace and order were absolute in the inner city, so despite being someone from the city lord's mansion, Yu Leping didn't dare to make a move against Yang Kai there. If he wanted revenge, then he could only do so in the outer city or when Yang Kai left Clear Sky Island. But Yang Kai didn't pay it any mind. Right now, he almost had a complete grasp on the situation on Clear Sky Island. Other than the Clear Sky Island Lord and Ice Heart Pavilion who were threats to him, the other emperors were not really worth much. So, even though he knew he was being followed, Yang Kai just pretended not to notice it and went straight out of the city gates. Meanwhile, inside a tea house in Clear Sky City, Yu Leping sat with a gloomy look on his face. Who knew what sort of elixirs he had been taking for his injured arm, but it was mostly healed. Suddenly, he took out a communication bead and looked it over before his eyes lit up and a smirk appeared on his face, thinking of leaving the city. Go ahead. There was a path to heaven but you refused to take it, and no door to hell but you came knocking. I hope you found yourself a good place to be buried. As he spoke, he pushed his divine sense and sent out a message. As soon as he left Clear Sky City, Yang Kai knew that Yu Leping had no plans to do anything to him even in here despite being able to. It seemed that, because the outer city was still within the confines of Clear Sky City, Yu Leping felt it would be best to do whatever he wanted out on the solitary void sea. Yang Kai went to the dock and stood under a certain palm tree, leaning against it quietly. Meanwhile, he observed his surroundings covertly, looking around to see who it was that Sangda had invited to help him. The dock was very lively, with ships coming and going one after another. There were those who had returned with their harvest, and also those who were eager to set sail for their next big job, but there were also those who failed to get anything and came back injured or dead. People of all shapes and sizes were there, showing off the diversity of life. Yang Kai soon noticed a gorgeously dressed young woman who, like him, was also alone here. She was standing near the dock, seemingly waiting for someone. This young woman had skin the shade of polished pearls that seemed as smooth as jade. She had a sensuous body, but her lips were turned upwards slightly in a wicked manner and her eyes were biting cold, causing her to appear like a very unsavory customer. Many cultivators were deterred by the aura surrounding her when they tried to approach. Seemingly noticing that Yang Kai was watching her, the young woman turned to look over at him, but instead of being annoyed, there was instead a smile on her face. Yang Kai averted his gaze completely, but both of them knew that they could be one of the helpers invited by Sangda. In other words, they were going to be working with each other after this. Other than this young woman, Yang Kai did not find any other possible candidates. Or perhaps, they had hidden themselves. After all, it was impossible for Sangda to invite only him and this young woman. There must be others as well.